Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. In this video, I'm going to unbox and review the Olto-8 Infinity II, which started life as a crowdfunding campaign and has now arrived in my mailbox. And I'll go through my thoughts about it and my thoughts about whether it's something that is worth buying. And overall, it's a reasonably interesting watch with a repurposed miyota movement, and I mean, it's aesthetically at least unusual, is what I'd put it as. Maybe not the most wearable watch in the world, maybe not the most legible, but it serves the purpose for a fun watch to wear every now and then. So I'll give you my thoughts about the movement, the aesthetics, and generally, like I said, whether it's worth buying. Now, before we get into the watch itself, I've recently set up a website, www.luxuryprofessor.com. It would be great if you check it out. Let me know your thoughts about the website when you get around to looking at it, because it would be interesting to hear ways to improve it if you're interested in checking it out. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's have a look at the watch. Okay, so here we have the cardboard box that it comes in, and it even says Olto-8, www.olto8.com, unsurprisingly. So we'll need to open this up and get into the watch. So we open it up, and inside we have a green inner box, and we have this kind of buttressed by this foam. So we can bring this out and then explore the box. Now, the box itself is actually attractive. I dare say these crowdfunding campaigns have definitely stepped up their game in terms of their packaging. We have a green card box here with some gold lettering, which has been kind of embossed into the case. Otherwise, all around here, we have more gold lettering that says, "To the best time," which seems like a really dumb motto, but whatever. Then, continuing around, we have, it looks attractive as a case. Then we have, obviously, the URL embossed here, and then again, "To the best time." So not terribly much else to say about the case, but it is reasonably attractive. I quite like it. Like I said, many of these crowdfunding campaigns have stepped up their cases. Sigurd Design is another one that has done a good job. So we can now wheel off this cardboard outside, which keeps the whole thing together. I'll just try to edge that off and put it there. Alright, so we can open this up and then get into the watch. Now, opening it up, the roof here of the case has kind of this squishy texture on it. It's kind of foam-like. I suspect there's some form of foam or something underneath it. So we bring that out, and then we have a short manual here, which looks like a piece of card. It says there's a warranty here, and it says Olto-8 gladly offers a limited warranty covering defects in materials and manufacturing for a period of 2 years after the original purchase date from an authorized Olto-8 retailer. This warranty does not cover case blah 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 blah. Basically, if you butcher the watch, it's on you, is basically what it's saying. And then there's an instruction manual, which you can get by scanning the QR code. And it says, in an effort to reduce our carbon footprint, instruction manuals can be downloaded from our website by scanning the QR code on your mobile phone. Now, I suspect this is probably in an effort to cut down costs, but I mean, it probably does have a marginal impact on the carbon footprint, but it's probably mostly costs, if we're totally honest about it. So we can leave that to one side. So here's the watch itself. It is embedded in kind of a foam-like container. Now, this is like really resistant foam. So it is kind of cushy, but it definitely is firm. So we've got the watch, and we have the strap. The strap itself should be rubber, and yes, it is rubber, encased in plastic. Now, the watch, I got the green version of the watch. It does, however, come in many colors. The green version I got because, well, I don't have a green watch and it looked interesting, but also it apparently has a ceramic coating on it. This ceramic coating supposedly makes it tougher, more resistant, etc., etc. In their marketing spiel, they say, "This is the same ceramic coating that is used in military-grade weapons." Well, maybe. Let's face it, not all military weapons are created equally, and not all of them need high-quality ceramic coating. And anyone who's used a Unimog will tell you that oftentimes they're a little bit rubbish. So whether or not that really means anything is another question entirely. In any case, this is the watch. It has some plastic all over it, which can't be good for their carbon footprint, I dare say, but nevertheless it has some plastic all over it, which we can try to remove. At least attempt to. Now, it is an unusually put together plastic here. It's kind of all around, as opposed to just on the sapphire crystal. So here we have the watch. Now, what I'll first do is I'll discuss the aesthetics of the watch, and then I'll talk a little bit about the movement. Now, the movement itself is in equal parts unremarkable and interesting. It's a miyota movement, but they have reconfigured it, as you can kind of tell from the shape of the dial. All right, so going in here, what we can see, I'll start off with the case. The case is green here. It has a ceramic coating on it. They do definitely deserve some credit for having an interesting case and interesting materials. So I feel like that's a huge positive. Now, it looks a little bit more matte in person than it maybe does on camera, but it's definitely a matte green color. Now, it obviously won't be to everyone's taste, but it does come in other colors as well. So, for example, the white one also has this ceramic coating. Not all of them, of course, do. It is, of course, a square. The square is approximately 44 millimeters. Now, with this square, we have a crown that is on the side here, at kind of the corner, which is interesting. And I'll get to the crown in a second. Now, let's focus on the dial at the moment. Now, the dial has multiple layers. It seems to have about 5 layers, because we've got the different hands. These different hands are different layers in and of themselves. The dial itself is kind of a separate layer from the movement inside, and we're getting multiple different layers. This creates rather a lot of visual interest. Whether it's too much visual interest is another question entirely. I think from a distance it's attractive. Well, maybe not attractive, striking is the best way of putting it. However, I would challenge anyone to really be able to read this immediately. Like, let's face it, reading this is not going to be simple. So I think its utility has maybe reduced, but its aesthetics have become more interesting. The second hand as well is also interesting to look at, right? Because we can see it has 3 parts on it. Kind of, I guess, shuriken-like, but anyway, we have 3 different prongs on the second hand at the bottom, which just go around in circles. Again, I don't think that helps legibility any, but certainly is interesting when we have that 3-pronged design. The R's are all across the top here. Again, I don't think that helps legibility, but I think it helps interest. Now, you could get this dial in both Roman numerals and in ordinary numerals. I've obviously gone for Roman numerals. I mean, again, that's a matter of personal preference. I thought the Roman numerals looked more interesting, and since I figured the watch would be so illegible anyway, I might as well just go for the interesting look anyway, because I'm not going to be reading the time from this, to be honest. But it does look interesting. It's basically the summation of the story here. Now, one thing that I do want to point out is it appears there are multiple different colors. Now, we obviously have a yellow, and we have a green, and that's great if you're feeling patriotic and Australian. And I am Australian, at least by citizenship. So I guess given it's the Olympics at the time of recording, maybe I should be wearing this out of sheer patriotism. But yeah, I mean, we have the yellow and the green, and then we have seemingly maybe 2 greens. Is it 1 green, 2 greens? Might just be 1 green in the center, and this outside green. I feel like the matte green kind of clashes with the more vibrant yellow and the more vibrant green. I think the textural integrity kind of goes because these are different hues. Like, this green is a different hue from the yellow, different hue from the green. So I think that could be improved upon. I'd probably try to get all of these to have similar hues if I were to redesign it. Now, the glass here is sapphire crystal, which I mean is great in terms of scratch resistance. Going around to the back, obviously we have some more plastic on here that I can remove in just a second, but we've got some plastic on here to remove. Now, each of these is apparently individually numbered. There is a limited edition comment here, apparently 500, although when everything's a limited edition, nothing is. So I would not read too much into the limited edition numbering. Mine apparently is number 37. I have nothing really to say about that. I mean, there we go. Now, the movement itself is kind of signed with this Infinity logo. Unsurprisingly, being Infinity II, that makes sense. But otherwise, it's relatively undecorated on the back. Otherwise, around it, we can see 5 atmospheres, sapphire, i.e. for sapphire crystal, and stainless steel being remarked here. So that's pretty much what we have in terms of the movement. It looks quite okay from the back. obviously more attention has been paid to the dial than to the back, which makes a fair degree of sense, given that you're not going to be seeing the back, well, not often anyway. Now, going around to the side, all of the surfaces appear to be finished, uniformly and to a high degree of quality. So, in terms of finish, I have no particular complaints here. We seem to have a seam running halfway along, which is an interesting way to have the seam. Now, over here on the corner, we have the crown. The crown is signed, albeit slightly. We have the Infinity logo on the crown, which, looks nice enough. The crown itself appears to be kind of this bolt shape, which is probably good in terms of getting purchase on using the crown. So, that's basically what it looks like in terms of aesthetics. Now, we can look at the straps as well while we're on this. The straps are rubber. Now, they are quick release straps, which is super helpful because I hate putting on straps. And if you had multiple straps, you could use multiple colors. And this would also be helpful being quick release. They do offer multiple colors. I personally didn't see the need to, given that this is green. And would you really want more color on this? I feel like having another color would just look ridiculous. So let's try to put on these quick release straps. Alright, so I now have the strap on. That's basically what it looks like when you've got the strap. The black strap is probably the one that is going to look the best on it. The strap is rubber. It has some texturing on it, which I think looks nice enough. I would not necessarily say the strap is particularly unusual, but I think that it suits the watch. So that's what we've got in terms of aesthetics. And then if we go across, we are going to get 45 millimeters across, thereabouts, and I assume it's going to be roughly the same in the other way. Yeah, about 45 millimeters. Now, in terms of the lug width, let's have a look at that. And try to get this in. I assume it's going to be about 21 millimeters lug width. Yeah, so about 21 millimeters lug width is what you're looking at. So it's a reasonably large watch. I'd say it's on the up end of what one would regard as wearable, but certainly not egregiously large. And I think it's going to work perfectly well for many, many wrists. But let's see how it looks on my wrist, and we can go from there. Now, I don't have a particularly large wrist necessarily, so for me, given that I have a small wrist, if it looks okay on my wrist, and I think it looks fine, it's probably going to work on most wrists. I could get away with wearing this. I oftentimes wear 36mm Rolex Datejusts, so they obviously were a little bit larger than 36mm. But I think for me, this works perfectly okay. I wouldn't necessarily want to go any larger, but I'm happy and satisfied enough with the size of this. Alright, so now let's talk about the movement. Now, with the movement here, it's a redesigned miyota movement, or at least they're saying that it's redesigned miyota movement. Now, the movement itself has 21 joules, which is probably adequate enough for something that doesn't have any other complications. I'd say the main claim in terms of the movement is likely to be what they're talking about with the redesign, or at least some of the redesigning of some of the hands. How much of a redesign it is another question entirely, because it does appear that we've got effectively 12 hours in the top half of the dial. So going from effectively, yeah, it does look like 12 hours, 12 to 12. So that, to some extent, is kind of like where you'd have a 24-hour dial, as you sort of get in some GMT-like movements. So, it's a little bit different there, in terms of a little bit different from an ordinary dial, but I would not necessarily say it's so ultra unique that I'd be going overboard talking about how special it is. So, it's nice to have. It's interesting, but maybe not like super, super innovative, given that we've got 24-hour dials in some other types of watches anyway. But still not bad for this price point. It does create some aesthetic interest. The hour hand obviously has two ends to it. Now, maybe I'll work out throughout the course of this why that's the case, but it certainly does not appear obvious to me why. The second hand, as I've indicated, has 3 prongs on it, and it goes around in this 3-pronged type way. Although I dare say it seems to function much like an ordinary second hand, so I'm not sure that we really gain very much from it other than aesthetics. So I'd say there's a bit of a subtle redesign, but maybe not the level of innovation that sometimes one might infer. Now, if we go over onto the back, we can see 5 atmospheres of water resistance. That's about 50 meters. Now, in terms of the materials, I already mentioned this is a ceramic-coated case. We've got stainless steel otherwise, sapphire crystal dial, and presumably sapphire crystal at the back in the see-through case back. So I'm just trying to look a little bit more at the dial. Like, looking at the dial, it is innovative and interesting, but it does function very much like an ordinary 24-hour dial, is what I would say. And just looking through the dial, it is aesthetically pleasing, albeit not very legible. Now let's move on to the crown. The crown, as I've indicated, is in this bottom corner. Now, to get at the crown, we'll need to pull this out. It's not a twist crown, it is a pull-out crown. Now, you can tell that it has hacking. The second hand has stopped. Now, we can move around the hands. They move around quite well. No problematic resistance. It's a very smooth movement here. Seems to work perfectly okay. And I don't have any particular complaints about it. That's perfectly fine. If we push the crown in, no problematic resistance. Appears to wind. Again, nothing negative to really say about that. So movement seems to be perfectly adequate. Somewhat interesting in terms of the redesign. Probably not that super unusual. The interest is probably coming more from aesthetics. So there we go. That's what the movement is. Now let's talk and look a little bit at the Lume, such as it is. Now they claim to have some Lume on it, so let's have a look. So yeah, it has some Lume. Now, because this hasn't really been in UV light, it's kind of underrepresented or badly represented in this video. But you can see it has Lume on the hour hands or the hour markers and also on the hands, which I think is going to help with legibility and might in fact be even more legible at night than it is during day, if we're completely clear about it. So there we go, that's what the Lume is like. So overall, those are my views on the Olto-8 Infinity II. Definitely worth considering if you're looking for an interesting watch with a slightly unique design, and I guess a slightly redesigned movement. It creates a point of interest. I think it looks rather fun, but it is going to have some legibility issues. So if legibility is particularly important to you, this might raise some problems for you. But overall, definitely worth considering. It isn't super expensive, particularly on the Kickstarter campaign, so I definitely would recommend checking it out, even if you just do it just to check out what you think the watch is like. Alright, so hope the video has been interesting and useful to you. If it has, it would be great if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any thoughts about the watch, or any thoughts about what you'd like me to cover, let me know that in the comments below. And otherwise, I hope to see you for future videos as well. Bye!